So we have an interesting little project for today. I need to do some higher than normal precision work in my lathe. I have a little bit of grinding to do on a crankshaft. And one of the things that has bothered me about my lathe is the amount of twist in the bed, the fact that it cuts tapers because of the twist in the bed. And my solution to that is going to be to mount machinery leveling feet on the base of my lathe. You can see that I've got some angled door shims in there, but unfortunately that's just not giving me the level of control that I'd really like. So today's little project is going to be to drill holes into the concrete floor and set some chemical anchors into the base. And Justin here is going to be a helper today, right Justin? And we're going to mark the holes, move the lathe, drill the anchors, set the anchors, let them cure for 24 hours, and then tomorrow we should be able to set the lathe on top of the anchors and level the machine and get the bed as good as we possibly can. So we've made some pretty good progress here. I managed to get the holes all marked using a carbide scribe on my epoxy floor coating system. The two rear holes are drilled there and there. They're ready for cleaning and a capsule anchor. And then these two holes have also been drilled there and there, and they are ready for cleaning. And then I have two holes left, but I just figured I'd kind of make a comment here. I pilot drilled these with about a 3/16 masonry bit, and I find that just it's a lot easier for the larger bit to follow the piloted hole. Although I may be wrong about that, it might just be an illusion. This stuff works pretty good. I'm using a DeWalt hammer drill. It's one of their older series ones, not the full bore like Awesome Dealy, but it's definitely getting the job done, and it's doing a really good job for what I needed it to do. This thing was about, I don't know, $50 on Craigslist or something like that. So it's coming along nicely. I'll probably make a small video of one of the holes being drilled. It does go pretty well. Pretty boring stuff, to be honest with you. But we'll pick up and we'll do a better job of documenting the capsule anchors, because what we're using for this application is these chemical anchors, they're called, or capsule type chemical anchors. And what they effectively are is an epoxy pill. And it comes with instructions printed on the back. It's an epoxy pill. You bore the hole, you clean the hole, you chemically clean the hole, you drop this little capsule anchor in there, you drive in a stud with an angle on the end, and that smashes the capsule, mixes the epoxy, and then you let it set. Pretty cool system overall. And I'm actually really excited to get this done for my lathe. As soon as that is installed and cured, we will be going ahead and installing these, which is part of my leveling system. More about that later. So overall, coming along well.
Hello there, folks. Today we're drilling holes. Not as exciting as you want. Holes in the floor. And it's pretty loud.
Jack, could you turn on the vacuum, please?
Sure. Thing, Dad.
On, buddy.
So you guys might be asking, why are we drilling holes in this perfectly good ground? Well, the truth is my dad actually needs to drill the holes in the ground to install the lathe. Because we have to do a lot of lathe work, everybody. that's watching this video. Also, please subscribe to this video and leave a comment. Now as we continue on the second hole.
Turn on the vacuum, please.
Yeah, Dad. Now, as I said before, please like and subscribe this video if you haven't already.
Alright, that's the holes all drilled, all 6 holes to mount my lathe. Now we can move on to cleaning out the holes, and then we can prep them and install the capsule anchors. Fun stuff, fun stuff. Looking forward to this. Okay, so I had the air compressor fired up here, and I blew out all of the concrete powder from all of the holes. And we did run into a slight problem with this one. And I'm going to try and do my best here to kind of highlight the problem. If I can get the light to be just perfect here. And what ended up happening is we blew through the concrete on this one hole. And so I've been trying to get a good video of this, but it's really hard to see. You're just going to have to take my word for it. Bored all the holes, cleaned them all out when done, and ran into a problem. This hole right here blew through the concrete right at the end. And I felt it break away as we were almost at the bottom. All the other holes are fine. They have concrete in the bottom, which is going to be okay. What I'm probably going to do is get some 5-minute epoxy and pour it down in the bottom of the hole after we chemically clean it, just to seal it up, because the capsule anchors, I don't want that stuff leaking out everywhere underneath the concrete and not getting a good bond to the anchor. So we'll seal it up with some quick epoxy first, and then the capsule anchor will kind of be held in place. And what I'll do is I'll smash the capsule anchor vial as I'm putting it in there against the side, instead of using the bolt to smash it through the bottom, which is typically what you do. And that should kind of get me a good anchor in that hole. It's a little bit disappointing. Basically what that tells me is the concrete is just a little bit over 4 inches thick here. For the most part, all the holes were fine. The minimum drill depth on these capsule anchors is 110 millimeters, which is just a little bit over 4 inches. Would have honestly expected the concrete to be a little bit thicker here, but I guess that was ambitious on my part. But nonetheless, out of 6 holes drilled, only one of them blew through, and I'll just have to remember that in the future. What I may end up doing, because I'm only anchoring machine tools instead of and they're small machine tools instead of heavy industrial equipment. What I might do the next time around is bump up my drill bit size from the 9/16 that I use for these anchors up to 5/8 and then drill them down 100 millimeters instead of 110. Maybe even 90 millimeters, just to give myself a little bit more margin in the concrete, and that should result in an acceptable solution for the applications that I'm using here, which is attaching, in this case, this lathe, and in the future, my Bridgeport milling machine will get the same treatment. So that's where we're at. Probably bring you back when we're setting the last few capsule anchors. So just going to give a quick once over here of how I went through and cleaned out the holes. I blew them out with an air gun first, easy peasy, very noisy, no need to kind of record that. I just got some denatured alcohol here, and all I'm going to do is make sure that it's primed. There we go. Put a spritz down in there so the sides are wetted, and I'm just using one of these like toothbrush parts cleaning brushes here, because it ends up being a tight fit in the hole, and it's basically just perfect. And I just kind of go through and bring all the crap out as best I can. And then since it's alcohol, it dries pretty quickly and evaporates off, and I'm kind of done. And I've gone through and done that in all the holes. The aggregate is nicely exposed, it's clean, it's not all covered in dust. Very happy with the results of that, and kind of good to go there. And then over here on the other side, I'm going to do this. The other hole is prepared, and what I've got is a little cup of clear 5-minute epoxy that I've mixed up here. And what I'm just going to do is run that down through the hole. So I've gone through and cleaned all of the holes out. Pretty simple process. I just used a little bit of denatured alcohol spritzed in the hole and one of these parts cleaning brushes, because it ends up being quite a nice tight fit in there. Scrubbed it up and down a little bit, basically till it was clean, and then went to town. On the hole where I've blown through, I've got a little cup here of pre-mixed clear 5-minute epoxy, and what we're going to do is, it's pretty liquid right now. We're just going to take this and we're just going to pour it right down the middle of the hole. And I'm expecting that what that will do is kind of fill up and plug the bottom good enough for the capsule anchor to be able to seal and not have too many issues with running out there. I'm just going to kind of look down at the bottom of the hole and make sure that that's doing what I wanted it to do. Yeah, I may need to actually pour quite a bit more down in there. It looks like it's split out further up than what that fill did, so we'll mix a little bit more and continue filling that until it actually comes up to the base of the concrete, and that should be good enough for what we're doing here. Alright, let's have a quick chat about my machinery mounting solution here. So what we have is the chemical anchors, and these are a granulated anchor with an aggregate and a 2-part epoxy. And I'm not sure which one's which, but there's 2 different capsules in there. And when you drive the stud into the hole with the capsule set in it, Daddy's busy, Daddy be right there, okay? It smashes the epoxy and mixes it all at the same time in the hole. And then you just let the anchor set. Now once the anchor is set, it's going to go over this assembly right here. Now the way that this is set up, and forgive me while I get this set here, there we go. The way that this is set up, the stud and the anchor will be set in the concrete permanently. And then what I have here is 4 separate pieces in order to be able to mount and level my machine. The first piece is half of a 1.5 by 8 nut with a pretty coarse thread on it, and a all thread rod that I have bored out to I want to say either 9/16 or 5/8, I can't remember which, one of the two. And the way that this works is rotating this is going to give me my vertical adjustment, and that's what's going to allow me to level my machine, is moving the feet up and down as appropriate. On top of that, we set what's called a spherical washer. And the importance of the spherical washer is it's got basically a cup and a cone set up on it. And the way that this works is a spherical washer can move and take up significant angularity within reason of the mounting solution, and that's just always a good idea to place that anytime you're doing machinery leveling. If there's any misalignment in your foot, you can be putting a huge twist into your equipment and messing up all your readings, and it's what's termed in industry as soft foot. So we want to avoid that, and that's what the spherical washer is for. It takes up quite a bit of slop, realistically speaking. So that's the plan. I've got 9 of these made up, 4 for my lathe, and then 6 for my lathe, and then 3 for other stuff. I'll have to get some more supplies and make up another set. I kind of miscalculated on my material lengths, and I ended up with 1 less than I really wanted. I wanted 10, I ended up with 9. Stuff happens, the all thread wasn't quite long enough. So that's the mounting solution. So we have one more machining operation to do on this before they're finally complete. I need to put a pair of flats or a hex on the top of these so I can adjust them and do my leveling operations within the limits of the assembly. So not a big deal, just something I'm going to have to go ahead and do on the milling machine. Shouldn't be too terribly hard to do. I don't need much of a grip there. And then when I go to install these, what I'll do is I'll coat them all with anti-seize so that they don't rust and get stuck there. And really looking forward to getting that done, my lathe leveled, and my cuts more accurate, which is really the end goal of this particular little project here. Okay, so I've got my 6 capsule anchors and my 6 studs all set up. These studs are A193 B7 material. I cut them to 8 inches long, and I clipped the ends of each one to a 45-degree angle as per the instructions. These are galvanized and they should be pretty good, but when I final assemble everything, the idea is that we'll go ahead and put anti-seize all over this stuff so that it doesn't degrade over time. I'm probably going to go ahead and do a couple of installations off camera, and then I'll set up my camcorder so I can do a full install and kind of show you all how this works on camera. Really big fan of these epoxy anchors in general, and they do a really good job. Realistically speaking, when these are properly installed, you develop some very significant strength from this installation system between the epoxy, the anchor, and the stud. With the amount of surface area that's in contact, very easy to actually make it such that the actual threaded rod will fail before it pulls out of the anchorage. So very good solution in my opinion, and it's going to be way more than I actually need for this application. So very happy about this. Okay, so you can see here that in the background behind the ammo cans there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're waiting on installing number 6. And this is the one I'm going to kind of show the process over. And works really well. I'm using for installation my 1/2 inch cordless DeWalt drill, which is basically perfect. I chose 1/2 inch rods here for the installation. They just slide straight in the chuck. All I have to do is tighten it up a little bit and then go ahead and do the install, which in all honesty is an extremely straightforward process. There's almost nothing to this. I honestly couldn't be happier with the result. It basically works beautifully. So the capsule anchor is actually already sitting in the hole. I just dropped all 6 of them in there. It's basically right here, right at the tip of my finger. If I put the drill in there, it kind of sits. So basically all that I do is I just lift the drill up a little bit and I drop it onto the capsule anchor, and you can hear it break. That's the glass vial that it's in. It's full of an aggregate, and then we just install it. And that's it. That's all we got to do. That epoxy is good and mixed. That anchor is down in there to full depth. And the only thing we got to do afterwards is wipe off the little bit of excess that squeezes out. And we are set. In about 1 hour. Actually, let me check the box. Yeah. So, for 30 degrees Celsius, it's an hour and 30 minutes. 20 degrees Celsius is 2 hours. So in this case, probably about 2 hours, it'll be fully cured. And since this is already the evening for me, I'm not going to do anything with it till tomorrow morning. Now, those of you who are observant probably notice that some of the studs are maybe a little crooked. And that seems to happen with my method of drilling masonry without anybody to check for squareness. It seems like the drill and the bit is influenced by stuff in the concrete, which is not surprising. But anyway, the top of the hole is in the correct location. So in order to cure the fact that the studs are slightly off, what I'll do tomorrow is when I lift up the lathe, I'll bang the rods around until they line up really closely. And since they're just threaded rods, they'll bend at the core or at the root like once, and that'll be perfectly fine. This is standard practice in heavy construction. And then I'll slip the lathe over top of it with my machinery leveling feet. And I'm just going to demonstrate that here. Right there. Machinery leveling foot, go over it like that. It'll be able to adjust up and down with no issue. I still do have to cut the slots, but you can see I got plenty of slop in both of these elements and can take up a fair amount of angularity with the spherical washer, and that's generally the idea with these things. That's exactly what they're there to do. So the stack up will look exactly like this. We'll go ahead. Oh, great. So here's my spherical washer and a height adjustment screw setup. And it just slides over here like that, and then the lathe feet, which can be seen over here, will sit on top of those, and I'll bolt them down solid, and that will allow me to adjust and level my lathe bed, bolt it to the concrete floor, and make it incredibly stiff so that nothing moves. And I'm really looking forward to getting this done. This is something that's been a deficiency on my lathe for years, and I'm finally getting around to fixing it. Alright, so it's the next day. All of the epoxy has cured. I have coated the studs with anti-seize because we are about to try and install the machine and see how it's going to fit. Go ahead and show the pucks here. These are all made up and ready to go. Put some flats on them so I can adjust the height using a wrench. Took a while because yeah, it's pretty hard stuff, that A193B7 stud material. And then all of the washers are also coated with anti-seize because the only person who's ever going to mess with it is me, and the last thing I want to deal with is rusted chock blocks. So that's all assembled and ready to go. Gonna go ahead and slide them all over the studs and then get the gantry, my little engine hoist set up so I can lift up the lathe and go ahead and set it on the studs and then start the leveling process. Gonna have to clear some of this stuff out just to give me enough room to access everything, but that's okay, we can go ahead and do that. We'll get that done. We'll get the studs on there, and then we'll get the machine kind of mounted up and then start leveling it. Okay, so lathe project is officially complete at this point. My lathe is bolted down wonderfully to the floor. I did actually have a complete failure of the anchor on this side, the one that blew through. That anchor actually did not hold, and I suspect that what happened is when I set the anchor, it broke the epoxy in the bottom, and the epoxy that was there leaked into a void underneath the house. It's really unfortunate, but at the end of the day, it didn't actually affect the ability to level the machine, which was a positive thing. I honestly probably could have gotten away with just 4 supports on this particular lathe, with 2 at the front level there and 2 on the end, and that would have more than likely been adequate. It's not the best. I may go back in there at some future date and try to repair that after all the epoxy's cured. Maybe the bottom is sealed up now and I can try again. But overall, utterly thrilled with the result. I was very easily able to go through and level my bed, which was the end goal of the process, and I was able to grind the crankshaft main journals for tractor engine that I've been rebuilding slowly here. It was, I would say, basically 100% successful. This is one of those deals where I got a bait and switch from a shop that wanted to charge me to machine back the thrust bearing face, weld up the crankshaft, machine it again, and then grind the crank. And effectively, the shop didn't want to do what I requested, which was to just, grind it, and I'll set back the thrust gear. I think to some extent, a lot of folks maybe misunderstand that this tractor is from 1939 and generates exactly 13 horsepower. This is not a highly stressed racing engine of any sort, and frankly, with the job that I've done, this tractor is probably going to run till the sun dies a heat death. But overall, very successful. I'm going to walk around and take a close-up of the final mounted solution. But the lathe is rock solid. I was able to spin the crankshaft during the grinding operation without a single issue. Lathe was rock solid the whole time. I honestly couldn't be happier with the result. This is something I've been meaning to do for years, and I'm honestly very glad that I went through and did it. The accuracy of the parts that are coming off my lathe has improved a decent amount. And I have a lot more confidence in my setups now that I have done this. And although bolting to the floor is probably not a requirement on other stiffer machines that are maybe in a better place, with this particular machine, what I found during the initial attempts to level it was that the cabinet and the lathe itself, the lathe is too light to allow me to just move the cabinet around at the base without the ability to pull it down. And so what was happening is as I tried to level it, I would try to level the side close to me on the end here. There's just not enough weight there, and rather than twisting the bed into the appropriate location, it would just lift the whole end up. So I needed to be able to pull it down. This has worked out wonderfully for me. We'll go take a close-up of one of the feet. So here we have the entirety of the solution mounted on the floor. It lifts my lathe up a few inches, which is fine for me. I'm a taller fella anyway. I did leave the threads a little bit longer than I probably needed to. I was thinking maybe I would space them up higher, but there's no harm to that at all. The entirety of the solution was very good. You can see here that on this end I've got the threads engaged about halfway, maybe a little bit less, into the nuts on each side here. And then on the far end of the lathe, there's actually enough slope on my garage floor that I ended up putting a half-inch spacer in the form of some DOM mechanical tubing under that end in order to be able to level the bedways. And at this point, the bed of the lathe is now leveled, both longitudinally, front to back, or I guess end to end, as well as across the bed. Both ends of the lathe, I think within a thou per foot is the resolution of my precision levels. So overall, super happy with how this has turned out, and my lathe is much more rock solid than it was. I can come over here and try to move it, and it just stays rock solid to the ground. Yeah, I understand that the floor might shift and that might affect my level, and maybe I need to come in here and readjust it once in a while, but just from what I've done here, the improvement cannot be stated. Super happy with that, and I'll be taking much better care to rock solidly mount and level my future projects as I go through and get those completed as well. So, all right, that's the update. I thought this was cool and worth sharing. Don't see a lot of stuff on mounting machinery on YouTube, so I thought this was a worthwhile share. As far as anchoring down the equipment, I think it's really worthwhile to do. It gives you complete and total both up and down control of your machine. So if it is twisted or warped or not heavy enough to pull itself down, this solves all that problem.